Now, I'm a card-carrying, self-confessed old house freak. Georgian Rectory or Victorian Gothic Revival folly, I love them all. But here's the question. Will anybody be oohing and ahhing over modern houses come the millennium? Well, we asked 3 design gurus to select their classic 20th century homes of the future.
These 2 apartment blocks in Highgate provide the highest living space in London. Built in the 1930s, the penthouse was first occupied by the building's architect, Berthold Lubetkin.
The first thing you notice when you come into the apartment are the absolutely sensational views. I mean, you can see 5 counties from the apartment, so that's from 2 windows alone, standing in one room in London, which is quite extraordinary. Lubetkin apparently found this building when he got drunk in a pub outside it and decided that this would be the best place in London to build a high-rise apartment block. But he really thought about what the sort of light and sun that would pass over a block like this would add to the building. There's actually an arc of light in the ceiling. It's almost like a living sundial coming into the room. Lubetkin was a Russian émigré, and he'd lived all over Europe before he actually settled in London, and he was always a confirmed socialist, and so he saw that as being a very important aspect of the way he planned and organised his buildings. So there's a real communal aspect to life here at High Point and the shared facilities like the tennis court and the swimming pool, but also in the way that the building was financed, the whole structure of ownership. All the tenants actually collectively owned shares in a sort of imaginary corporation, which is the building. If you look at the sort of criteria for judging a really great building, in theory it should be technically innovative. It ought to take architecture sort of further and forward into the future. But also, I think it really does have to be a beautiful, lively place to live that improves the quality of the people's lives who live here. Now, I wish I did live here, so I'd love to wake up in a beautifully proportioned room like this and look out at these sensational views, which really seem to celebrate London. You really have the sense of a foreigner coming to the city, loving it, but looking at it with fresh eyes and creating a place where people could really enjoy it.
It was way beyond our budget anyway when we saw it on the market, but we sort of pretended to the agent, hey, we're sort of wealthy clients coming to look at this apartment, but as soon as we stepped in, we knew that was it. We just have to kind of do everything that we had to just have it.
In the 1960s, Span Developments built a number of 3-bedroomed houses in estates like this one in Middlesex.
Well, Span housing represented to me a breath of fresh air after the sort of bogus mock Tudor and mock Georgian developments that were being built just after the war. What it was landscaped areas, almost like a campus with cellular housing around. But the way that they're arranged in the gardens, you don't get the feeling that that you get with a Georgian terraced house, is that every house is identical, and you don't get that regimentation, and you get a sense of individuality with them. It was originally designed as affordable housing for the creative professional classes, by which I mean sort of teachers, musicians, and people like that. And by and large, these sorts of people are still living here. It's almost 40 years later. When you come from Teddington High Street with all the traffic and everything, and you come round the corner, and then you go in, and all of a sudden it's sort of quiet, and you can hear children playing and birds tweeting, and the only clutter you see is children's bicycles and things like that. What really makes the Span housing so special is the quality of life you get living here. Not only are the buildings themselves beautifully detailed, very, very well laid out, high quality fittings, but there's also the fabulous landscaping and the planting that's gone on, and the sense of community and security and safety, which makes it like a haven.
We thought that the landscaping, the general layout might work very well. We weren't sure it would. In fact, I think it has. You never get the feeling that people are intruding on you. And in general, I can't imagine that we would find a much more congenial environment to live in.
In 1962, Edinburgh architects Morris and Steedman designed this pair of 4-bedroomed houses.
Life was far more formal in 1960, and what is interesting about this house is it projects a much more informal lifestyle. When you come into the house, all the bedrooms, bathroom, the ensuite, most of the storage space for that aspect of living is all contained on the ground floor, nothing else. You climb up through this magnificent spiral staircase to this wonderful, extensive dining, living and kitchen room. And it's a massive tree house. You're up here under the canopy of the trees, and the light infuses from the trees. It glistens through the windows. The living area is tremendously flexible. Unlike contemporary houses of its period, you have, to start off with, an enormous volume. Within that volume, you can change the configuration using the 3 sliding screens. These go right across the plan, and they enable you to separate off the dining space on the one hand, the staircase, and the access to the external terrace. Great if you want to sort of give your neighbours a surprise when you invite them round one day. The house can be totally different the next. I think a house built as simply and robustly as this one will stand the test of time extremely well.
Where else, even in Edinburgh, would you find a situation like this with a unique house, a unique environment, a mile and a half from the West End of Edinburgh? It's absolutely super. It couldn't be better. Well, I suppose it could. One thing we might have done that I regret now we didn't do, and that was have a loo upstairs.